Welcome back to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said. Today we are very excited to welcome Meg Ripley on the show to talk about Necrology, the first book in a duology that will continue in November. Welcome, Meg, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Next, I think we could do a little bit more of an introduction than that. Okay, here's a couple other fun facts. She's apparently the best roommate to have.
At NES.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you,
hmm
Bridget.
Okay, she got
I I have
highly
some.
recommended
Yes,
by Creature, which
Yeah.
we had already met you before that. But she's also an amazing panelist moderator.
true.
Um,
I
eh,
still have your amazing sticker that Bridget gave me from that horror reader weekend. Um, Excellent swag for her books you can add
Thank you.
to.
Yeah. I love tooling away on stuff like that.
a Pitch Olympics winner.
Hmm. Have a great big baby skull trophy in the corner of my bedroom.
That's amazing. I love
Yeah.
that. Necrology has so much to dig into with this. I love this book. It's one of those books that when it came out, it was very timely. For better, for worse, it might be even more so in 2026. um,
Hmm.
but so someone picks this book up, what are they going to get from it? What are you going to tell them?
They're going to get, a child's lens of um, the I guess, the terror of the patriarchy, I guess is how I would sum it up.
Love that.
It's a feminist book, it's a horror book. Is it extreme horror? No, it's subtle, moody, grim, dark fantasy. It's got a big dose of fantasy because it does have witches in it. And it's about a family slash coven who are sort of scattered to the wind and the story of how they're all going to come back together.
I love that. And, I don't know if I've ever like specifically asked this because I feel like it can be so cliche, but for this one especially, like where did this story come from?
This story was actually my COVID book. It just sat in a drawer for years afterward. So this book, had been reading His Dark Materials with my kids, and I just
Oh,
loved Lyra, and I just loved the althiometer, and I loved, all of the characters in it, how dark it was. It was a book that had children in it that really wasn't necessarily written for children, and that's sort of something that I've always really loved about Roald Dahl's work. It's sort of I've always been, Jim Henson's movies, they are sort of for kids, but what it's tackling are bigger stories and bigger issues. So I sort of felt like I wanted to write something like that. I didn't know whether it was gonna be for adults or YA. I did know I wanted a child protagonist. I did know I mean, we were in the midst of Me Too and, Black Lives Matter at that point. That summer was such like that was like a crazy sort of, a lot of things came together at that point along with COVID. And, just I had this sort of a question in my brain on like, what is the, Dr. Frankenstein that created Harvey Weinstein? I kind of
ugh.
really want to know how it is that still in this day and age, this man is allowed to wander around. Um, so that was my jumping point, I think, like, how is this allowed? And wait a second, because women historically have held power only in certain spaces.
Mhm.
So it's just wanting to explore women's power. So I gave them sort of an innate magic. Um, and then decided the later decision was witches. And I went from there.
I love that. And I love how the book begins in Salem, in the midst of, all of the hysteria. Um, and it's sort of this immediate um decision of these very, very powerful women to make this really huge sacrifice to sort of suppress that innate magic that you're talking about for this idea that it's going to give them some kind of safety, right? That they won't be
Right.
sought out because of that. And then it sort of flashes forward to this wonderful, child protagonist rabbit, that's living at this sort of, like, magical, orphan home where magic is still alive and well, and I just love that idea that in trying to save themselves, they trusted very, very untrustworthy people, namely powerful men.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think that that's just it, and it really is, to be fair, because I think a lot of readers, or sorry, I would say some reviewers have, recalled the piece as identifying women as good and men as bad. And that really is an unfortunate take given the
Yeah,
setup actually being power held in one place and not another, and an extra dose of sort of this group of women, fine. If you really can't handle us having this type of power that you're not entitled to, we will sign off of it and you just leave us alone. But of course, powerful men, that's just not the way it works, you
mhm.
know. And so I just really wanted to play with that. I think it unfolded a little bit like a really awful Orphan Annie kind of a story where she's taken in by a group, of powerful political people, and then there's the fallout.
That's a really I would question someone with that take, because there are really good male characters in this book, especially one, and there's really bad female characters, especially one. So I think that it definitely that idea that it's such a black and white dichotomy is not I didn't get that at all from this book. It was definitely much more about, who wants to hoard all the power and who wants everyone to have it, right?
Right. I mean, I think for my witches, for the dirty, as they identify, they really are preoccupied with sort of something called librium, which is like an equilibrium in the force. Basically, that's
Mhm.
the way I could sort of quickly summarize what librium or what the wilds would be, which is sort of Mother Nature. And in Mother Nature, they're just looking for a certain amount of librium, which is equality in the system, and they're sort of always striving for that, not looking to dominate, just find a good balance, and everyone live their life the way they deserve to.
Yeah, and, the sort of, like, figurehead especially as the book opens, is the character of Whitetail, and she is just such a fascinating character because she is kind, she is loving, and she is terrifying and powerful, and, like, as the book goes on, we're kind of seeing everything through the lens of Rabbit, who's lived there, but kind of not known what's going on in this greater world, and kind of reconciling that Whitetail is a lot more. There's just a lot more to her than just this sort of like mother figure that she's always seen. So I just want to see, like, as you were developing this character, like, what kinds of thought processes did you have? Because she's just so interesting.
The thought process for Whitetail really, was I wanted to have I was very inspired by Miss Justineau from The Girl with All the Gifts. Have you
Oh,
ever
yeah.
read that book? My
Mhm, yes.
Carrie. I just love that book, and I loved the teacher student relationship between Melanie and Miss Justineau. So I kind of like was sort of striving for knowing that I had a bunch of orphans and I had this headmistress. I wanted to have sort of a wise elder on the scene, who was going to shed some light. Originally, I actually just had Rabbit, and it wasn't working great because she just came off as way too naive,
Mm.
way asking way too many questions to other people and trying to get information. I just could not really pull it off. So quickly, Whitetail come on the scene, and I really put her in the uncomfortable position of being a mom, knowing what she preaches to her kids, and yet wanting to sort of keep them in a safe space, so only giving them part of the information here. Like, we are just gonna subdue this revolution right now because I can't handle you guys getting hurt.
Mm.
So I'm just gonna actually put a big old Band-Aid on this and put it off for another 200 years. So that's, at some other juncture, we will deal with equality. But for right now, I can't put you in harm's way. And basically that's her whole arc.
Yeah, and it's sort of like from the very beginning, you know, she talks about how she knows that her time is, short here.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting that, she's very much like she knows certain events are kind of like inevitable. She just, again, like you said, she doesn't want these kids to be hurt. But
Mhm.
at the same time, it's kind of, you question because she knows she's not gonna be a part of it either. It's like, well, who's going to be doing this then? And it creates this real, like, tension, and it creates a tension within her too because, there's POV chapters where it kinda seems like she's having this fight within herself of knowing, you know, uh, kind of what's right and not wanting to see these children that she loves so much hurt at the same time, and that creates a really, like, dynamic tension, like, within this one character, which, you know, also has another tension within herself that I don't know if you wanna
Right.
talk about or not.
Yeah, no, yeah, of course. I mean, I will say that, Hyena's voice is in a lot of ways, even though it's radicalized, is the voice of reason in
Mhm.
Whitetails, because Whitetail really is sort of hell-bent on kicking the can down the road. And
Yeah.
Hyena, the voice within her, is gonna call it out at every opportunity, and sort of be even abusive in the way she treats Whitetail. Um, yeah, I really I love the duality in the inside the one character of having Hyena and Whitetail in sort of like one unit. It was really fun to write her. And really fun to write Hyena too, because it really was "Listen, ma'am, if you're just gonna kick this can down the road, you know no good is gonna come from this."
Yeah, and I
And
love
Whitetail
her, like,
saying,
where she's kinda like, "Just give me a couple minutes to take control, like, I got like, come on."
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, I feel like one of the things I wanted to just touch on that's not so book specific, but it is Women in Horror Month right now.
mhm.
Yes.
And, I think that your voice is one that's super cool and just what you're doing and how you're supporting everything. And, you're going to have this second book coming out later this year too. So I just wanted to ask a couple of questions on, do you treat yourself? Do you celebrate anything during this month? Like, do you do anything else for, um, you know, just in general? Like, I don't know if it's like a practice or anything, but do you take time to reflect? Because you've broken through the noise where, a lot of people, um, are out trying and, you've made such a successful novel and everything. So what does that look like? What's the experience been like for you?
I mean, I owe a lot of that to Creature, to be honest. I mean, signing with the feminist horror press specifically gave me already sort of like I guess, a platform of what I was going to be or what this book was going to be because it was published in a certain way. So, when you're hunting for a publisher for your book, I mean, it could be published several different ways, presented to the world several different ways. I think I was just lucky enough because, like I say, this book went on submission with my agent. It died on submission, got put in a drawer for a year, and then got pulled back out, and sold to Creature. And I feel like the timing was just right, and the press was just right, and the book was just right for them, that it was sort of like a magical moment.
That's
But
amazing.
yeah, and I'm of the idea that, of course, we celebrate women in horror month. Um, but I'm also like you. I'll read women all the time. So my practice, I think, is more a constant reflection of, rethinking things. Earlier today, I was sort of thinking about, how it is that I came to horror in the first place when Yes, I watched a lot of horror as a kid. I was left alone. It was just my sisters and I for a long time. My single mom was at work. So, of course, we watched all the things we weren't supposed to, super inappropriate at a very
Right?
early age. And I loved it. But also, like a lot of my adult, um, sort of like through university, undergrad, and grad school, I took so many art history classes through the years, art and religion, just even general art history and looking, there's just so much when I look back. I'll be stirring a pot of noodles on the stove and I'll think back to a certain painting and think, wasn't that so messed up? So I think I'm just someone who's always actively sort of looking back at, wait a second, Leda and the Swan, that swan was Zeus and he was actively raping her. And I feel like that painting is so beautiful and iconic. And I was thinking about this painting, but man, that's messed up. And, there's certain things today that I feel like every day try to chisel a little bit at my lens, the way I see the world and what I'm asking of it.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. It's funny, I think art history is one of the most fascinating subjects, and started getting piqued and interested in it when I was in my 3rd and 4th year of Spanish class, and then it went into, like, in college when I further took that, but we actually had to take trips to, like, the National Gallery of Art, and, um, in order to understand the experience and what was so superb about it was you really had to understand the dynamics of a lot of times the politics or, the what was happening in there and why it was so profound. And I find that, literature is such a wonderful complement to the art where, if you really and we've been talking a lot about that recently where we're saying like, movies do this, art does this, books do this, and it's just this form of creativity. But I feel like with the book narrative, you can really chisel away at something. You can shape things in a different way. But the painter had a medium to do, these things. But it's just to me, I'm in awe of artists that can convey and whether it's directing the movie, writing these things, just in general. I mean, it's such a skill and a joy that people can bring this. Even, musicians and it just seems like there's so many talented authors that we talk to that have a couple of these skills going, but also have just an appreciation for these other things, right? Because it all comes
Yeah.
into how they're able to write these things and just come to this form of expression that you are willing to look through different lenses and dig deep and good research.
Right. I mean, I feel like, well, on the on the subject of research, at one point I was like on a panel with Christoph Paul at that horror reader weekend we were all at last fall, and he said, "Are you able to remove yourself from your characters, or are they you?" And my answer was, "They're all me,"
Hmm.
because all of these people, even the assholes, are part of me, as in they're an exploration of what do I think about this? Where do they belong in this story? Um, but, I think I've written a lot of books through the years. This is just the first one that got published, and I think there really was sort of like a learning curve there in deciding personally what it is I had to say, and being brave enough to sort of say, "Fuck it." In during COVID, I left my agent because I was, like, not happy with him. "I'm gonna write a new book. I'm gonna write a witchy book, and it's gonna say this because screw Harvey Weinstein, and the world deserves a whole lot better than whatever's happening with Black Lives Matter over here. We can all just decide that this is just we need to get on with this and move on to a space where we aren't having these same old arguments." Um, and that's, I think just deciding what I wanted to say, helped a whole lot with banging the book out.
Yeah, and I think that again, thinking about the things that kind of brought this book out and the feelings that you were having, and now we're in the time of everything going on with the Epstein files and it
Mhm,
just continuing to get worse and worse and worse about what happened. Um,
mhm.
and I think that that's kind of the story of what Rabbit realizes as this book goes on too, right? And it's like, this house, the Andrews house, it's this house of horrors that looks so beautiful and stately on the outside, and,
Mhm.
from the very beginning when she first sees Adams, and it's like, does everyone notice that this guy looks really messed up? You know?
Right. He
And
looks
it's like,
rough.
yeah, and I love, like, she's talking, I think it's to Marianne, right? And it's like, "Does everyone else see this?" And they're like, "Yeah, we just don't talk about it." And it's like, if that
Right.
isn't a metaphor, like, in some for what happens, like, I just love that.
Yeah, I like that too. I sort of was like, well, I wanted to have sort of something be the visual cue, and I thought, well, why isn't it sort of something that's sort of rotting everyone who's in this mindset of like, I'm actually a horrible person and passing it off as someone of high stature, that I'm
Mhm.
someone who to be respected, but deep down, I know I'm a complete piece of shit. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like I'm being eaten from the inside out by my how horrible I am. I did have fun with that.
Well, that idea of, like, you kind of take on the face of all the victims that you have taken, it's like you're
Yeah.
taking on all of this, like, pain and all these things, and it's like every time, this person looks in the mirror, that's all they see, and I just love that kind of, like, final bit of revenge that they have, right?
Yes, I know. I really love that too. It's like, well, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is acknowledging it in yourself and
Mhm.
having to look at yourself and admit this to yourself. That's probably the hardest, worst thing, right? Because you can apologize and not give a shit. There's so many things you could do that are so performative, but like having to acknowledge it to yourself, like looking in the mirror. Ugh, I'm actually a monster. It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, and then, like, that kind of, like that little seed is sort of in Mrs. Andrews too in her teeth, right?
Yep.
Where, she tells the story of how she lost all of her teeth and they never came back. And
Mhm.
then the one time she kind of mixed in with the dirty, she got those teeth back. And, then she had this horrible, like, guilt, and well, the boy that she liked really treated her poorly.
Right.
And now she has literally these rotting things in her mouth.
Yes. Yeah. I love inventing sort of backstories for people or like invented folklore just in general. But getting to have like letting Floyd have this moment where she's finally feeling good about herself and then immediately go to this boy almost to seek, approval. See,
Mhm.
you didn't recognize me before because I looked like that, but here I am. And him turn around and be like, ugh, and just deck her. Like
Yeah.
really like give her. That was just it was fun to write because it is a metaphor for self-acceptance.
That's awesome. We all need more of that for sure. Um, so I wanted to chat with you too a little bit about um, just being in the New York City and being able to be so close to like having these abilities to do the moderation. I touched on that. I know you have a big one coming out, and uh, but what is it like to? I mean, do you geek out when you meet other authors? Like, what's that like for rejuvenating your writing spirit? Does it? Doesn't it?
Well, one, I will say that the New York horror community has to be the nicest, most welcoming community I could imagine. I don't know what I expected exactly.
Yeah.
I expected a lot more coolness. And of course, all these individuals are incredibly cool. But the fact that they welcome me into their circle, welcome me into their homes, welcome me to their events, it's it's a dream. So that feels really incredible. It feels like being in New York City for me is a leg up. I'm not saying that people should move to New York City, but I am saying
Yeah.
that I mean in terms of access to a certain community, um, it is incredible.
I mean, just the little bit that we, um, were up for Twisted Spine and hung out there that night, I mean, there is a vibe, and so many of the people from the New York horror, community were there, and Adam and I left, and we were like, "We should move to Brooklyn."
Yeah.
Like, it was just, like, this intoxicating feeling of, like, "Wow." So, certainly can relate to that of just a smidge, right? And then you get to live it all the time, so, uh
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is a privilege. Is it easy to live in New York City? It is not. There's been definitely been several years in a row often where I've been like, "We gotta get out of here." My husband and kids, I think, "We gotta get out of here." And yet I also, like, don't know where else I would move.
Mhm.
You know? I guess the Catskills, I do spend a lot of time in the Catskills. The Catskills definitely inspired this book. I had this moment over COVID. My kids were doing, Zoom school, running around mostly without clothes at that point. I definitely clothes on camera, I promise, but, otherwise, we're completely feral, and I had a moment where I was like, "They're never gonna be this small again." And I
Mhm.
really wanted to, like, hold it and keep it like in a bottle, store that. But I love New York City. I love New Yorkers, and I love the New York literary community. I gotta say, they are the best. They're the best, most supportive group you can imagine. The
Well, it's
coolest.
interesting because, like, COVID in, like, a place where we live, where it's suburban, rural kinda thing, was obviously a traumatic experience for anyone that went through, lockdown and everything. But I feel like just um, watching whether it's movies, whether it was the news coverage at the time and things like that, it feels like COVID in New York City was a special kind of trauma.
I think so, and I am fortunate enough that I missed it. I missed it because I was in the Catskills with my
Oh,
kids. I
yes.
have a property that I share with my in-laws, and they weren't there at the time, they were down in Georgia, and so we just hopped in the car, and we went up there, and the kids and I just didn't come back for, like, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think a lot of it a lot of um, the pot banging and a lot of, like, the
Mhm.
really scary, "We're not even gonna go outside, wash every vegetable," stuff was sort of we'd learned enough by the time I came back that it wasn't just like, "Oh my gosh, this is a horror movie." Um, so I'm completely privileged in that regard. I was up, like, growing corn with my kids in my garden, playing at mom camp, so, I'm very
sounds
lucky
Well,
because of that.
amazing,
that's int
genuinely, like, I know for some people, like, the experiences were absolutely horrific, and I never ever take that lightly, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of depending on where you were and what you're doing, especially I feel like speaking only for myself, but, like, I think my neurodivergence finally got to heal. Like, I learned so much and I was able to reset and I wasn't like rushing to work every day and I was like outside and actually walking and doing and like I think we spent more time hiking and just trying, a lot of people got outside, but well, certain parts of my mental health crashed because it was like, what is this life and where am I going
Right.
and what am I doing? And then other parts thrived that had been covered for so long.
Agreed. I think, yeah, it was definitely it was a hard time, and yet I think I had found so much wonderful in it, time with my kids. I've never played so many board games with my kids.
Mm.
I've never read so many books to my kids.
Yeah.
So I really, as awful as it all was, I really do treasure, like, the memories from that time. Because, I mean, as a New Yorker, everything and kids these days, everything's so scheduled. Everything's
Yeah.
like, "Go to work, do this, do this." And it really was, in a way, a big pause.
Yeah, definitely, and I feel like I can kind of see now that you're saying that's, where you were. It's like, I imagine, especially the opening, sections and looking back on the times when they're at this sort of, like, farm, beautiful land where it is kind of, serene and all this kind of stuff that it would feel like that kinda came into the book in that way, but then also, like, when you think of the opposite, where it's, like, all of these, kind of rumors, "Oh, you need to do this. Oh, there's this new threat," is kind of, the lives that the Freemen have where they have this power and they're in this place, but, like, they're so scared all the time, right?
Mhm.
And I just love that it kinda that juxtaposition of, like, Whitetail and these kids just having this, like, amazing life where they just are getting what they need, and that's all that they want is what they need, and then these scary, men
Yeah.
that are, you would think, "Oh, they have cars and they have everything that they want and need," but they're the ones really that are scared.
It's, yeah, and it's carried over to my new book, ICE isn't there specifically, but I mean, there is a door-to-door sort of, delivery of a testing kit. I
Mm,
mean, I really held on to sort of that feeling of like, what's happening now? Oh, we've got this. Oh, okay, this is like the new technology. We're gonna figure this whole dirty energy out. We're gonna nip this in the bud. So for Woodfeast, I've actually carried on with the exact, it's like the similar COVID-y kind of elements.
and one thing that's really interesting, and I'm wondering, how it came about that it is, it's Salem
Hmm.
and it's places that we know, but it's not really the same world that we live in, right?
Right, it's definitely, I mean, I guess a lot of times it gets called an alternate history, but
Mhm.
in my mind, it definitely isn't that exactly, because that would be sort of like our world up until a certain point when things split. So, like, the classic example of, alternate history would be, like, if the Nazis won the war,
Right.
or that's, we didn't, and my book really doesn't have that exactly. It has actually a whole history before page 1, so I'm just gonna call it an alternate reality.
Yeah, that's cool because, like, we can see things in the Freeman and their Black Book and all that kind of stuff, but then when you actually get into sort of their beliefs and what's there, you're like, "Oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it was." And that's really interesting, and I love digging into, the lore and just the sort of this is a very different, like, magic than and witches than I think, has been explored before. The way that the magic is accessed and the sort of, like, the the feelings and the sort of purity and the, like, thoughts and, like, the way you have to focus on things. I think, it just was fascinating as a reader, and I'm like, "More, please, thank you." Like
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for in terms of magic, it really is sort of like a low level magic in a way. It's a group of kids asking sort of Mother Nature, which in this case is called the wilds, whether or not something is possible or not. And there's just sort of, you can ask, and usually in the game of 63, you usually have two people playing it. One is who's asking for sort of the wish, and the other person is a representative in the game, which is sort of like, it's a dice game, um, where they're a representative of the wilds themselves, and this whole thing is going to be hashed out over the course of this game. And ultimately, it's, you have to depending on the role, you don't get your wish, you don't get what you ask for, or you
Mhm.
do.
Yeah,
So it's sort of it's pretty low level magic. In Woodfeast, I think there's a little bit more. But again, this is not Harry Potter.
right.
Right, 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 right.
Yeah, it's so, like, there I think there's a reason you named it, like, The Dirty and the Dirt, right? Because this is very much part of this energy that sort of is nature and all around us,
Mhm. Yeah, it's
and
definitely that, and it's also just reclaiming sort of femininity and female sexuality, and just female energy in general, as so it's things that have been stereotypically named dirty, and taking that as sort of like a point of pride.
yeah. And so, like, as the book is opening, I love the fact that, Andrew's the junior,
Yep.
um, he knows more than most of kind of what is going on in these systems and things like that, yet he is still just absolutely attracted and obsessed with Whitetail to the point that
Mhm.
he wants to marry her.
Yep.
And I think that that is really interesting to show that, like, there's that innate draw even when they're saying, like, "No, this is so bad."
Right. I mean, I think, a woman in that case, it was a woman of great power, and someone who wanted to own her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and see how that worked out for him, right?
Right. Didn't go great.
And the other thing, at the that's so interesting in this image that is so striking is that Whitetail is growing these antlers, right? And I
Mhm.
just wanted you to kind of speak on that, where that image came from and sort of like the thought process behind what they represent,
Yeah.
because they are such a big part of her character and some horrible things that happen involving them throughout the book.
Yeah, I mean, well, so the antlers show up after Whitetail has done something that she knows she's not supposed to have done, which is play 63 alone, and
Mhm,
she's played it alone because she knows what she's asking for is so wholly sort of impossible, um, sort of like on the verge of like in her world this would be taboo. So she
mhm.
doesn't want to draw any of the kids into her mess. She does the thing, but sure enough it actually her wish does come true. But the side effect of this is sort of this disfigurement. So these antlers grow out of her head and even she in that moment I think isn't exactly sure what they are. Um for, the readers, what we're eventually going to learn is, well, in the signing of the September contract, which is the contract where women signed off their innate magic, um, the Dirty were asked to hand over 2 tokens sort of in good faith. One of
Mhm.
which being the Necrology, which is sort of a stone that represents all of female, dirty history and another one is a stick called the Woodfeast. And so, what eventually comes about is the reader will recognize that these are part of all tied back into that contract and all a manifestation of what's gonna be happening in the future.
Love that. That's so cool. So excited to see this second part for sure. Um, I think that the other thing that is so enthralling about this book, and it has this very like draws you in because I don't want to say like everyone talks about a slow burn and things like that because it's not quite that to me, but it's this dread through the entire book of like what you're going towards, right? It's like
Mhm,
this trial is going to happen. And all sides are so dependent on what Rabbit says in this trial.
mhm.
And Rabbit herself is kind of like, who do I trust? What do I really think now? Like, she's getting so much information that she doesn't know what to believe, in these things. And I love that aspect of like, this book is just this character knowing she has this thing that's going to happen, and just all of these things leading up to that moment, and it's almost like the only thing I can think of is, like, Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, where Helm's Deep's gonna come, right?
Right. That's
And
so
it's
funny that
like
you say
yeah.
Keep
that.
bringing it up. Now
Sorry.
now I gotta now I gotta try to pay attention after you talked about I have the people that come on here that like and we get on the Lord of Rings, I find later, like, when I like the Lord of the Ring memes on Instagram, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that author
No, I
liked it
need to
too?"
send this
And
to
I'm
yeah.
like, "Okay, we got a bond."
But it is that, like, sort of thing where it's like there's so much development, there's so much that you care about that when you get to that moment, it's like, literally, like, I'm like, my teeth are set, and I'm like, "Oh god, what's she gonna say? What's gonna happen?" Because Rabbit,
Yes.
being so young, it's like, she's the whole time, she's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna tell the truth. I'm just gonna tell the
Mhm.
truth," and you're like, "But what is that gonna mean when it gets time to it," right?
Right, and what does that mean for her mom,
Yeah.
telling the truth is actually, in a lot of ways, condemning her mom, but it's the right thing to do, and it's what her mom would preach that she does, but it's she's so conflicted in that moment because what she's supposed to do basically, she's just a little kid who's trying to save her mom and trying to sort of get back to when everything was okay at the orphanage, knowing full well there's really no going back. So it's tragic.
Tragic. Yeah, I think that's the only way to put it. Did we lose her?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
So
Um, no, and I love that, Rabbit is kind of feeling the same way that, like, everything that she does and all her decisions are also, like, I want to save because she knows besides Rook, everyone else is in custody too. And it's
right.
like, it's sort of this threat of something terrible is gonna happen to them. So it's sort of like Whitetail and Rabbit separated, have the same
Yeah,
aim, but without being able to kinda talk, and Rabbit understanding what it was that happened, at the beginning of the book.
yeah,
It's so difficult to know what that is. And I have to say, like, that whole final section, you don't realize or don't think, that something explosive, however you wanna say it, is gonna happen, but that last, I don't know, 50 pages or whatever it is, I was like, "Damn, Meg, you're not messing around." Like,
definitely not.
it goes hard.
Yeah, it goes hard, because some of it is sort of as a writer, you set certain things up, and then you sort of, that's that the you either write it so that the reader sees it coming, which is satisfying for the reader, or
Mhm.
you make it something different and they say, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that." And so you gotta make the decision, right? And so the setup really was what it was from almost Whitetail's first page of
Yeah.
like, this is the situation.
Mhm.
So the ending in my mind, I just followed through with the promise. But it was really emotional to write because Rabbit, when she's standing in court, she doesn't know where her siblings are, and as far as she
Mhm.
knows, they're still being used as sort of leverage in what her
Yeah.
answer is gonna be in this moment. Um, it's a lot of weight for a little kid. Yeah.
And there's one moment, not to spoil anything, between Whitetail and Rabbit, at the end that I was like, choking back some tears a little bit, where Rabbit kinda gets that thing that she really needs at that moment, right?
Yeah, yeah. The
Um,
wi she asks the wilds and they come through for it, but not exactly in a way that she understands quite in the moment. It takes a
mhm,
minute for it to kick in, what actually is transpiring here, but she realizes what she has to do is ask for what her mom wants, knowing that it's not what she wants. But
yeah,
that's a sign of respect for her.
right? It's,
Mhm.
like, so beautiful and sad at the same time. Um,
I'm glad, I'm so glad. I
yeah,
because it made me sad to write it.
yeah,
The ending of Woodfeast made me cry too. I think that's just maybe the way I'm built, even though it's not the same. It's not the same. But that's the thing, the emotions were there, and saying goodbye to
yeah.
the characters at the end of or whoever at the end of Necrology, it felt like a lot.
Yeah, and, I have to ask, knowing, the last line of this book, had you written Wood Feast already? Did you ha or, like, what was the actual writing process for the 2 books? Like, when were they written?
No, actually, Necrology sold as just a standalone with serious potential, and then shortly after I signed the contract for Necrology, Creature said, "How many books if we were gonna do a series, are you open to a series? How many books would it be?" And sort of because I'd never written anything to a contract before, out of self-preservation, I said, "Let's make it 2 books. How about there's 1 more
That
book?"
makes sense. That's, like,
Um
reasonable, right? Like, I
well,
can
I
only
think it's like
do
I
one.
don't have a writing history. Like, I didn't take writing classes. I didn't have like a this hasn't been part of my career up until my 40s. So to the thought of like delivering a book freaked me out.
No, yeah,
So yeah, so I didn't I so I my agent at the time, Erin, she said, well, let's brainstorm here, spitball a little bit and come up with like what would it be and then decide whether or not you would like to write it. So I sat down. I think I banged it out in like a day or so, what it should be, what it would be if I wrote this book. And luckily Creature approved it and I started writing it sort of shortly after, definitely with publishing Necrology. There was some breaks in there because, with small press you wind up doing like a lot of emails like for, reviews or
mhm,
thank you, even thank yous. Some of that stuff is time consuming. So um, there was definitely gaps in there, but this book, the final sort of version of this book was sort of like in place around May of last year, and then we had developmental edits and it got better, and then it had one more round and it got even better, and then we had a couple of I had an edit from Amanda, who's the publisher for Creature, and
Mhm.
it got even better. And I couldn't be more excited about this book. Has it changed my mind about writing to a contract? I don't know.
Right,
But,
right, like, don't rock the
But
boat if it went well.
right, let's check the reception on Woodfeast before before I sign any more contracts without the book already being written.
Yeah,
Um, so, yeah,
I'm trying to think, like, if this book ended as it did and there wasn't a second book, I think, I don't know how I'd feel. I think I'd be a
I
little
believe your
angry.
exact words were, "You would actually hunt her down." Fantastic.
So, yeah, no, like, it cries out for it, obviously, and, I think that not having read Wood Feast, I'm very interested to see what that means because it really is like, you kinda have an idea of what's gonna be involved, but, you know, what that looks like, no with what happens at the end of this one, it's like, I'm sure that was, okay, what does that actually look like for that to
right.
happen, right?
Yeah, so I think, it's in a lot of ways, Wood Feast is gonna be just as sort of abstract with, like, a lot of world building as
Mhm.
Necrology. Um, in Necrology, the witches get found out.
Right.
In Wood Feast, it's how we're gonna bring equality home
Mm.
for the team. So, the Dodds will be back again. Floyd is wandering around. She's one of my point of views. Rabbit,
Oh,
and then we have a new point of view who I'm very proud of. Her name is Jane.
okay.
So, yeah, it's I think that it's a little bit darker. It's a little bit more horror, but probably just as much world building, I'd say.
Yes. Well, that we can look forward to in November, correct?
November 10th.
November 10th, and everyone, when you listen to this, run, if you have not already seen it, to Instagram, social media, and look up this cover. It is
It's a beaut, Clark.
gorgeous,
It's a
and I
beaut.
just, wanna talk a little bit about how much input because I know it's different, but we talked to Saskia Nislo about how Root Rot's cover and how Creature is such an amazing publisher to work with when it comes to covers. Just wanted to know how much input you had for these 2.
For these 2, I had a fair amount. My background is visual arts and illustration and design, and that was, like, my whole personality until, after I had kids and decided I was gonna switch gears. So I had a good idea of some things that I wanted. Creature said, "Well, what are you thinking?" And I sent samples of what I liked and what I didn't like. And I knew I wanted a hint of blood, not super bloody. I wanted something that looked mildly historical.
Mm,
And I wanted something that included traditional women's work because in arts history there's craft and then there's art, and women's work has always been, put in the craft category, which is a lesser art form category. So
mm,
it felt like it was important for me to have something of women's work, women's sort of either like rug knotting, embroidery, and that's what I asked for. And when Louisa Diaz came back with the cover for Necrology, I couldn't believe it because it was so perfect.
yeah,
Um, I think she did like two minor edits, and I was like, "It boom, it's perfect." And pretty similarly for Woodfeast, which I had an idea because this is where in Woodfeast, Rabbit's gonna sort of like Pandora, open the box and see what's inside. Wait a second, what is this history that we're working with here? Because I don't understand the ins and outs of like how it is we arrived at this place. So I asked for sort of I wanted it to look like Necrology, but have sort of this Pandora type element, like the woman who's willing to open up the box and change history. So that's what Louisa worked with. And yeah, sort of because there's a portion of Necrology where Rabbit sort of witnesses a moth. So the moth is included on Woodfeast's cover because it's going to be sort of be her driving force
mm,
through the course of. Um, Woodfeast.
Mhm.
But those elements all in place, I mean, it's beautiful. Louisa does, like, the most beautiful covers.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would say, like, as I look at the cover, like, the detailing on it too, like, you see this first image, and it's definitely very, like, visually arresting, but then you notice the singeing on the top of the burn, the fact that, the embroidery, the work of the rabbit, but it's kind of, unraveling or not quite
Right.
finished yet, like, all of these things I look at and I'm just like, after reading the book, I'm like, there's just so even more to, like, see and know that, like, this cover is just perfectly encapsulating what's inside.
Yeah, and the acorn branch, given the line,
Yes.
mighty with the mighty oak quote. It's really beautiful, and I love that the embroidery is unraveling. It's sort of like Rabbit's identity is unraveled at certain
Right.
points of the book. So it's perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely. So we are very excited. You've built a beautiful world, and I can't wait to continue in it. Um, so are we any kind of events we've met, saw you at Horror Reader Weekend, seen you at Twisted Spine. Where else can people find you if they want to come see you get this book signed or talk about it?
Well, if you're in New York City, I'm gonna be at the Twisted Spine tomorrow night to
Oh,
help David Scott Hay launch his Butcher of Nazareth. It just came out last week. It's phenomenal. As well as launch the Headless imprint, which is Whiskey Tit's new horror imprint. Um, so I'll be there tomorrow night, and past that, you can usually check my website for events. I'll be at StokerCon.
okay.
I'll probably at Spooktastic in the fall with
Oh,
Creature
we'll be
because
there.
they will have a table,
Nice.
and, a couple more visits to the Twisted Spine, one for my book, but also, a little something with Robert Ottone coming up, so, yeah, I'll
Oh,
be around, I'm always around.
amazing. So we will see you
She will
at
find you. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, these you're with good people
Yep,
and I mean at good events, so
we will see you at a number of those hopefully.
yes, absolutely.
And obviously we look forward to very much reading Wood Feast and then having you back to talk about finishing this story.
I can't wait, I can't wait. Can't wait for you to read it,
Awesome. Yes.
can't wait.
Yes, I can't wait for sure. So thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night and good luck and
Thanks
have
for
fun
having
tomorrow.
me. Thanks for
Yes.
having me, guys. Alright,
Thank
I'll talk to you
you.
soon.
Yep.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.